this, Dan and Isaac. So guys, got my biker lights as I was telling you about. We're just going to wait for all the social media to kick in. We're going to go properly live with the great AHDB with Isaac, and we've got our fantastic speaker today, Dan Sodergren, who's going to be talking to us about who's the godfather of modern marketing. As we wait for all the socials to catch up, Dan, you were you were hosting an awards dinner last night, were you? What awards dinner was that?
Well, that's a great question to start with. It was the Manchester Publicity Association. They are about 2,000 organisations in Manchester, or 2,000 companies that are part of this umbrella organisation. They've been going for 100 years, actually, and it was the 10th year of their award ceremony, and we were doing something for the first time ever. They have a Best Place to Work award, and so I was handing that out, and it did make me smile that it's taken them 100 years, a decade, and COVID to suddenly realise that actually, in a global pandemic, to actually realise that places to work are pretty important, and best places to work should be celebrated. So it was lovely to be able to be there, and I'm a great believer in what we're doing there. So with YourFlock and other things, so it was fun. So today's a little bit. I might, for the first couple of minutes, I might just be a little bit, jaded.
Yeah. What award ceremonies? They're really interesting things. What's the weirdest, wackiest one that you've been to?
Oh, good Lord! What's the weirdest, wackiest one I've been to? I've been to one. Yeah, that's not an award ceremony. So I'm just going to clear that out completely. I just realised that isn't an award ceremony at all, and not to talk about it even slightly. So I'll get rid of that. I would say there are lots of fashion ones are quite fun. When I've been to fashion award things, yeah, they're interesting, and I always find that without being too silly about it, I know it sounds awful, but the MPA ones are kind of legendary fun things to do. So I'm going to go with Manchester Publicity Association. There you go. Really? I'll keep it on brand.
Okay, because Isaac, when was it? It was a couple of weeks ago. We had the Farmers Weekly Awards at the Grosvenor. I didn't attend, but Isaac, I think a number of your colleagues attended, didn't they?
I'm not sure. There must have been some from AHDB, and I know our CEO Tim Rycroft were there. I've been to the Farmers Weekly many years ago in a previous life, and caught the milk train back home, and then went straight into lecture at college. So not to be recommended.
Yeah, that's hardcore.
So Dan, it's always hilarious when a bunch of farmers descend on London. So you can imagine all these farmers in black tie going to the Grosvenor, sitting down, and it's a fantastic evening, because there's 500, 600 people, and it's all about the community within farming. But it's just letting farmers loose in London is hilarious, because they just don't understand anything. And I've been with farmers in London in black tie on the tube, and Dan, they start talking to people on the tube.
Oh my goodness! Well, that instantly. Yeah, exactly. And so you basically just terrify most of London as you're going through London.
Yeah. I met a farmer on the tube. I don't know what the hell ever. Right, come on, we're all lit up. Isaac, you lead us from your private members club to where you are. Can you give us a bit of background as to the AHDB and our fantastic Talking Leaders series, please? Isaac, over to you.
Thank you, Max. Yes, we are agri-leaders that I work for as part of AHDB. AHDB is a levy-funded organisation, so paid for by farmers, working on behalf of farmers. We do various areas, some knowledge exchange, research, marketing campaigns, market intelligence, all of that. And specifically the bit that I'm involved with as agri-leader is trying to help farmers to be better leaders and better managers of their teams. So very happy to have Dan here and to talk us through some of the things that he does in that arena.
Excellent. And Isaac, can you just show off about the great event that yourself and your esteemed colleagues organised for us at AHDB last week with some major YouTube and TikTok and Instagram influencers? Because that was brilliant. Can you just tell us about that, please?
Yeah, so it was quite a harebrained idea to try and get social media influencers from the world of farming all together in one room. Herding cats then jumps to mind, but it went down really well, engaging with farmers, but also engaging with consumers. And we've had over 43,000 people watch it across the various streams. So, it was great fun just talking about some different conversations, and hopefully, it'll be a regular thing, and we'll find out what people want to talk about and I want them to discuss. And we'll set the world to rights in an evening on every month, talking about issues that's close to people's hearts. So yeah, great fun with all the different social media influencers.
Yeah, well done. All credit to the AHDB team. Dan, it was mad because there was 7, 8 of us in one of the lovely rooms at the AHDB headquarters, and all the influencers had their own phones because we couldn't really work out the tech to stream everything from our live feed, and it's mad. Lots of jeopardy, but it worked really well. So we're going to do this. But it was the impactful influence of that younger generation, and also linking them up with the AHDB and talking about issues of the day, including marketing, but also like really important things like mental health, because it's a big issue within farming. So it worked really well. So come on, guys, let's get major on Dan, because that's why we brought Dan on, just for the sake of especially the people on the podcast. I just want to give a bit of a background as to Dan, the godfather of modern marketing. So we've already explained about the AHDB, and it's great to have Dan on. Dan's the co-founder and CIO of YourFlock. Dan is a TEDx talker, keynote speaker, ex-marketing agency owner, digital trainer, serial tech startup founder, and now media spokesman. His main area of interest is the future of work, remote work, data, green tech, and tech startups. He's co-founder of www.yourflock.co.uk, and Dan will stick all that on the tags a little bit later. And they are a team of engaged platform based on values. In his spare time, as well as being a dad, Dan is a digital marketing and technology expert for the BBC, donning the cape of consumer champion on shows like BBC Watchdog, The One Show, and Rip Off Britain, and being a market tech specialist for super shoppers and real, fake, and unknown. He's also hosting guests on podcasts and webinars, and also award dinners, and also loves speaking as a futurist, as well as being a guest on countless radio shows and a remote reporter, content creator for tech companies at tech events and shows. His main interest is the future. Wow. As we were talking about in our green room, we all need to know what's going to be happening in the future, be that the future of marketing or the future of work, on technology and how technology will change the world for the better under the hashtag Tech for Good and the hashtag Tech for All movement. Dan, was that a good summary or anything to add?
It was. I literally have nothing to add. I was born in 1976. I think we've pretty much covered almost everything there. It's
goodbye.
I'm going to use that recording forever. That was like the best thing that's ever been said about me. Thank you very much. Very kind.
No problem.
Yeah, I do have the joy of being a futurist. I was just joking the other day with a friend, and also at the award ceremony as well, that futurism is or being a futurist is quite interesting. But actually, it's because I did stuff earlier than everybody else did it. So like I did augmented reality stuff like 15 years ago, which is far too early in the hype curve to actually make any money from doing it. So you've got to remember, Google was the 23rd search engine, and then it made all the money. You don't remember who the first search engine was because, of course, they were most probably tech futurists. My point being is tech futurism is great, but if I was, as my mum always says, if I was really that good, I'd be sitting on a beach. Futurism is fine, but it's always. Sometimes I do wonder about. I've had the joy of being right about lots of stuff, but I think sometimes I'd rather be rich than be right. But that's a different point entirely.
Yeah, and do you, rather than people just blindly asking you who's going to win the 215 at Fontwell next Thursday, which must be really annoying as a futurist, but I absolutely get your place. Because as the older and grumpier that Isaac and I get, Isaac, I hope it's okay. I'm kind of bring you into this one.
Speak for yourself, Matt.
As well, you see the cycles of, especially within business, as to what works, what doesn't work, and also identifying good leaders and poor leaders, and that's why we're really keen to get you on, Dan, so we could just learn from you, from your outside learnings, and how we can bring that into our audience within agriculture. So with future gazing in mind, what excites you in the world of work in general at the moment, Dan? What can we look forward to? What do you think?
Well, I mean, we're living through times of revolution, like whether we see that or not. And I think this is the key bit. Like if you're sitting there or listening and thinking, oh, I'm not sure this is a time of revolution, believe you me, this is a time of revolution. This is a time where we will look back in 10 years' time and say that's when everything started to change in a huge way. So you've got the great resignation or the great reshuffle or the great whatever you want to call it. You've got lots of people now that are looking at their lives in a very different way post-pandemic. Yeah, and there's almost not one area where there isn't a revolution happening. And because of you're looking at the intersection of technology and political and economic stuff all happening at the same time. This is it's much. I think the Chinese say that we live in interesting, or may we live in interesting times. And I must confess, before the pandemic, I presumed, because I'd got a few things right, that I could kind of guess the future, and I thought I could do, and believe me, it's a tech futurist. It's not just I'm not a not a futurist as in what's going to happen to you tomorrow, I'm afraid, or personally. I'm not a psychic. I don't even believe the idea. But anyway, but you can kind of predict stuff would happen. But of course, the black swan event was COVID and the pandemic, and that accelerated everything so quickly. So I used to do stuff around digital transformation for large organizations and for companies around the country and then around the world. And we talked about these concepts, but those concepts now are in the past. So the idea of, remote working, the idea of hybrid working, the idea of breaking down jobs, the idea of bringing in AI and data and 5G and all these things I was talking about 5 years ago, they're happening right now. Yep. So the revolution for every industry is happening right now. It's happening in health tech. It's happening in everything, everywhere else it's happening. So agriculture, we're going to talk about this maybe a bit later on as well, but agriculture is at a moment of immense quick change. I think my mate Tom Cheesewright says it brilliantly. He talks about high frequency change, and he talks about the fact that we've just got to get used to the fact and become more resilient about the fact everything's changing really quickly. And I think actually agriculture might be a couple of years behind, but you might be noticing now that things are starting to happen quite quickly. But believe you me, this is the slowest it's ever going to change. That's the key thing I want you to remember. It's the slowest it's ever going to change. So if you're thinking right now, oh, heck, things are moving quickly, people are changing, the world's changing quickly, this is the slowest it's going to be.
Okay, so a question. Hold on, Isaac.
Sorry, Mac.
Isaac, I've got to ask a question. So, Dan, should we be excited or worried about the future?
Well, it really depends where you are, doesn't it? So if you are, you've got to have a growth mindset. All this stuff is internal, yeah. So everyone always talks to me about technology, but actually the technology piece isn't the exciting piece. The actual exciting piece is human beings.
Yeah,
it's human beings. It's like, for example, we're doing this now over technology, over a Zoom calls, and now we do it all the time. You ask people. I was doing Zoom calls 5 years ago, and people was like, oh no, you've got to come down to London. We've got to have a face-to-face meeting. We've got to do that because that's how you do it. Yeah. Really bad for the environment, really bad for loads of things, but it's just the way it was done. Just like doctors said, there was no way that doctors could see you using your mobile phone 4 years ago. They actually refused to do it. Yeah. Now, instantly do it. And now they're all going, oh my God, there's so many savings we've made because of it. And it's like, but what I'm trying to say is that technology is not the trigger anymore. It's now people. Now, if you're a technologist, that's why it's so exciting. Because it's actually other people seeing the technology and using it. That's the bit.
Yeah, and so Isaac, Dan said a really interesting thing that he feels that agriculture is a couple of years behind the rest of the sectors. What's your view of that comment, Isaac?
I think certainly it's come on greatly in the last few years, but I think I heard a very interesting quote by a guy called Jesse Sostren, and he said, "Stay at the intersection of influence and impact." And you've got to be, so you can't go too far down. If a bit like Dan was saying, about, if Google were the first one, they might not have been as successful. So it's that intersection between influence and impact. So it'll be quite interesting to hear your thoughts on that, Dan.
Yeah, and just to clarify that, because I didn't want to put Isaac in a hole. I think, Dan, you're spot on. I think agriculture is some 5-10 years behind other food sectors, especially on terms of marketing. If you walk into a supermarket and you look at the brand awareness of key power brands, and you look at we were talking about it on some film we did yesterday, that 6 out of 10 kids don't know where fresh produce or where fresh product comes from, and that's another whole debate. But that's us as a sector being bad at influencing the consumer, whilst other power brands and power foods and not particularly good have been very good at influencing the consumer. So I think with all this tech and all this change that's coming through, if we're positive about it, there's so much more that we can do. But Dan, we need to learn from you.
Well, again, it's not in a kind of right. So I've got to be careful with words, but basically, I'm only really good at one thing. Yeah, I'm pretty good at marketing. I'm pretty good at technology, and I'm a relatively good dad. So maybe that's 3 things. Okay, I'm being mean to myself. Maybe it's 3 things. And I occasionally can pull out a nice metaphor. So maybe that's 4. I'm pretty good on the radio. Anyway, the point being is that really my expertise is not in agriculture. So I can't stay in. It's one of those moments where I'm like, I'm very excited about what's happening in your sector, only because I don't see it from your sector's point of view, if that makes sense. Yep. I'm away from it. So I can look at it and go, oh my God, the potential for data in agriculture is so scary. It's hilarious. And the potential for literally, logarithmic change I mean, it could be insane, but of course you've got to get people to do it. Now, the problem you're going to have, and this is why, opportunity, problem, same words, all those kind of things as people talk about. This is the growth mindset moment. Yeah. If you aren't careful, then what will happen is technology companies will become farmers. Okay. Farmers won't take on technology, but technology companies will become farmers. They'll go into agriculture. And they'll do it relatively quickly, and they'll do it very easily without any friction, because they don't know not to. Also, if you aren't protected by, if you don't have a defensible moat apart from knowledge, then you're in trouble, because look at taxi drivers with Uber. The knowledge was meant to be the thing. We can't be beaten because we've got the knowledge of the local area. Well, actually, knowledge doesn't mean anything now. Technology does. Yeah. So I don't want to scare anyone on the call, but I'm just saying we've got to be really open to the fact that unless you take on the technology, unless you change, someone else will do it. But that someone else might not be your competitor as a farmer. You might not ever see them coming.
Yeah.
And Dan, it's that thing of if you do a SWOT analysis, what opportunities are in your threat box and what threats are in your opportunity box. So, we always talk about doing a SWOT analysis and looking at the strengths, weaknesses, etc. But it's which is opportunities is actually threats and vice versa.
It's really interesting you say that, because I was just working with last month with the Royal Agricultural University, because I do some work for them. I have done for their patron is now King Charles. I can say that now. There you go. Their patron's King Charles. It's probably the first time I've said King James. Actually, I don't know if I meant a salute or not there, to be fair. Sorry, my apologies. If you are listening, King, I apologise.
He always does it. Yeah.
Yeah, but I thought he might be dropping in. He loves a bit of social media. That's not really the point. So from the Royal Agricultural University, we were talking about SWOT analysis of their business ideas, but also PESTLE. PESTLE with the political. I think it's political, economic, social, technology. And that T is the big one for you guys. The P is important because it's political, but the T is really important to technology. And I can not guarantee, but because I've done quite a bit of work with the Royal Agricultural University, and they're 2 years or 2 decades, should I say, they're 2 decades, younger than I am. The things they're coming up with, I don't get because I'm too old to get it. But things like soil sensors, and how to use biometric things, and how to do vertical farming, and how to do farming inside, which uses 95% less water, and all these things they're thinking about doing now. So I can only guess that that's the future of farming based on the fact I get to know these young people. So my other bit of advice on the call is listen to your team and listen to the young people on your team. Because they are most probably, I think as Paul Cothello says, the next generation, they inhabit a house that you'll never visit. You might think you do, but actually you don't. So if you're like me and you're pretty, and I'm going to say old is older than 40. Sorry, everyone, but old, I'm not saying it's middle age, but it's old. You've got to start listening to 20-year-olds. They might not be right about everything, but they might be right about robotics. Because you might not have a clue because you haven't seen the TikTok video from China. That's the reality. Yeah. And
Dan, just to segue back a little bit, you were saying about bigger companies coming into this sector. They're already here. So in America, and I won't nominate them, but people will know who I'm talking about. There's a very large communications company that diversified into agriculture and have been acquiring software businesses globally to create a one-stop shop. So they're already coming in. And then just to give my example that Isaac's already heard on a previous broadcast, but just to give you an understanding that within the UK, a lot of farmers still don't have a decent software system for the farm. A business near us, a farming business near us, bought a £450,000 combine. So huge piece of tech, and it's an amazing piece of engineering, and that comes live with an app, so that either the operator or the farmer, the farm manager, can see in real time how well that combine is performing, and you can download all the information. You can see if there's any issues. This particular farmer, he got that app for free for 1 year, having bought this £450,000 combine. The second year, he didn't renew the app. It cost £350 because it was too expensive.
Because it was too expensive, yeah. Absolutely.
It's just like, so there is a bit of a disconnect. But yeah, going back to your great analogy about the young generation, and Isaac and everyone dial in. We'll know lots of examples of a farm that's been progressing well, but then the next generations come in and taking it to the next level because they've looked at diversification, they've looked at ag tech, they've looked at collaborations, they've looked at partnering up with external people. So absolutely, Dan, you're on the money.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is the future. This is what the revolution's about, though. It's about the internal stuff You know, there's a lot of internal work that people have got to do, but we've got to be a bit careful, because this kind of, as I talk about in my TED talk, I don't like to talk about it, but my TED.
Yeah, well done. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Little drop there. I don't know. I just have done. Anyway, it's all about the fourth industrial revolution. Yeah. And the fourth industrial revolution, people kind of they think it's quite a twee term, and it is, I suppose. But if you really understand the depth of what that means, because like we are literally living through the fourth industrial revolution. The problem with this,
we want to know. Tell us.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, the problem. Okay, so I'll go back to the original. So look at like something like steam power. Yeah, that's the first industrial revolution. Then you look at things that were like the assembly lines, which they think the second industrial revolution, because it all became more efficient. Now remember, the second one is just a mental process. That's just a way of doing something which is better. The third one is computing, and into that you must probably put the internet, because you can. And again, you know, think about it. The companies that didn't, or organizations that didn't use computers years ago, they were replaced by ones who did. Yeah. Then the companies that didn't use the internet were replaced by companies that did. And now this fourth industrial revolution, it's not just things like cloud computing, mobile devices, apps that you're talking about, a 3D printing, smart sensors. It's all data-driven, AI, it's all this stuff, but it's actually the fact it's coming together at the same time. The fourth industrial revolution is really data and AI. Just no one wants to admit it yet. But what it really is that computers themselves don't have to become self-aware for this to happen, by the way. Your farm is a huge amount of data that you're not collecting, but your online bookstore is a huge amount of data that other people weren't collecting until Amazon started collecting it. Yeah. And then they became one of the most powerful companies in the world based on the data that they farmed. Yeah. Now, farming is the same thing, except you're building a product, and I'm going to say product rather than crops, but you're building a product and you can find out trillions of bits of data points, but there's no way a human being can make that call because it's too complicated. Yeah. So you can either go, I'm going to go with my knowledge, my internal knowledge and my guts on this, and therefore I'll be successful. Or you widen it out to a data point and you learn and you use technology. Like it's a bit like a washing machine. Yeah. Now, if you are old school, you can say, well, I take my washing down to the river and that's how I do it. Yeah. Because I'm clever and I've always done it like that. The problem being is you can't run a laundrette by taking it down to the river, which is why the washing machine exists. Yeah, and that's not by the way, it's not the reason why a washing machine exists, but I don't digress massively onto that one, so I'm not gonna rant. But think about it. Even the technology trigger of the washing machine then created massive opportunities in political change, because technically you could argue, and I do argue against this and for it, that then gave women more time because they weren't doing stuff in the house, which then could have been part of the suffragette movement. So you can do the same thing with the printing press. The printing press technically created information.
Yeah. And Dan, you're on the money again. I won't nominate them, but earlier this week we did a broadcast with a company that's gained 50 million US of funding, and they have the technology to deploy sensors into greenhouses and vertical farms, and their technology can identify if there's an issue 24/7, whether that be a pest problem, whether that be a substrate problem, whether that be an irrigation problem, whether that be a temperature problem, and automatically fixes it. And they don't want to go out into open agriculture at the moment because there's just too many data points over there, but within a closed environment. So it's already coming. But the biggest, we'll give it another example, automatic milkers. So within farming, one of the hardest things about milking is that you physically have to milk the cows 2 times, 3 times a day. But the technology is here now where they're automatically milked. But one of the companies, Dutch company that invented that technology, the biggest problem that they had was convincing the farmer to give up milking, because the farmers were saying to them, well, what would I do with my time?
Yeah, exactly.
Isn't that my job?
Yeah. No, exactly. That's the whole thing, because it's the same thing. With YourFlock, we help team leaders become better team leaders, because we use data points and feedback loops and these kind of things. Anyway, it's not an advert for YourFlock, but we have the exact same thing. Office managers and middle managers start panicking because they're like, well, what will I do? And it's like, well, you'll do the human side of your job more because you've got the data. So actually, the stuff you're not doing, like you're not looking at employee brand enough, you're not talking to people enough, you're not doing enough one-to-ones, you're not getting to know the team enough, but that's actually your job. Now, if you think that my job is milking the cow, that's a mindset problem, isn't it? So what you might do is have to stand back and go, actually, my job is to work on the business which milks the cows. Yep. Well, that's a different proposition. And I'm not here, by the way, to leadership. We can talk about leadership in a bit, but I think that's the new kind of forms of leadership. You've got to really look inside yourselves a bit more than perhaps we've been used to. And certainly, I invested in YourFlock because I'm not particularly emotionally intelligent. So I actually needed it myself so I could help the team. Sorry, Isaac.
Go, Isaac.
I was going to say, it's a great quote that I heard is when you're in that position, leadership or management positions, is that connectivity is not part of the job. It is the job. It is really, and that's the only way you get teams and companies and farms to work is having that connectivity.
I love that. I absolutely love that. That's exactly it. That is the job, and that's I'm gonna say that I'm gonna say that tomorrow and pretend that I came up with it. So there you go. That's how mean I am. I'm gonna steal it. No. I'll quote you at least once. I'll say, well, I know a very wise man. He works. He's a wonderful fellow, and I met him. He said this.
To stop any lawsuits, I better say it's from Jesse Sostren, who's the global head of people at Salesforce. So I can't even take credit for it.
Isaac is name dropping today. Sorry, Isaac is name dropping today, Dan. I was saying.
Oh well, I can't fault you. If you're going to sit there in a members club, you might as well name drop. It's very much the background. I like that.
So coming down, sorry, Isaac. Dan, what excites you about from what you're learning from different industries that we can transpose, we can, through a process of osmosis, we can bring into the farming and agricultural sectors? Where do you think that there's going to be some really interesting links to bring over?
Well, the future of everything, I've got to be careful again with words. This is me name dropping. I think it's William Gibson. The future is everywhere, but it's just unevenly distributed. I think I've done a really bad job of doing. I think the actual quote, I think, is something like the future is everywhere. It's just unevenly distributed. It's not. Yeah, it's even undistributed yet.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
That one. That whole thing. Anyway, the point being is look around the world. Yeah, if you look around the world, now not even. I mean, if you look around the world just in agriculture, you can look around the world and you can see that Britain, I'm afraid, isn't ahead of the game. So there's a couple of very quick wins anyway, just by looking in your sector. That's pretty good. That's pretty easy to do. And I definitely look at that kind of stuff. I mean, if we're talking about individual technologies rather than just mindsets, I think you've got things like, just the ones that are going to happen quite soon are things like drones. Like, I don't know how many people at the moment are using drones in their technologies. I don't know how many farmers are using drones. I don't have the stats around it. But drones and robots and data are your quick wins in the next 5 years from a tech point of view. But only because they're being used by other people, and so therefore the price point drops. So as the price point drops, if you're in technically you can argue that farming's logistics in some of it, and you look at logistics companies. Well, you look at probably the world's most famous logistic company and see what they're doing, and you've got half your answers already. You've just got to have the mindset of going, I'm going to look outside myself. And I'm going to look at something else. Your job as the business leader might be to start being, like with YourFlock, I'm the CIO, which is the Chief Innovations Officer. My job is to look for different technologies and different bits where we can leverage stuff as a company. And we're a tiny startup, but we already know that CIOs, and that's a really important role. So really, as the boss of the business, you might want to put a little CIO hat on occasionally and think, right, I'm going to spend an hour now just to have a look. What are the Chinese doing? Because the Chinese are using 5G, like what it is, which is the fourth industrial revolution. It's a bit like not using steam when steam happened, or not using the water, like not using canals when the canals happened. It's like sitting there going, I don't believe in canals. You don't have, well, tough poo, because they exist. So you're not in a position to say I don't believe in them. So things like, I went on lots of government organizations and talked about 5G quite a while ago. I think one of the things we haven't done in this country, we haven't invested enough into our infrastructure from a data point of view, and I think that's going to hamstring us in the next few years. I won't do any anything rants about this, but I will say that if we looked at data as important as we look at roads, which we should do, because actually it's more important than roads. Yep. Data is more important. Being connected is more important than having a road to your farm. Actually having a 4G or 5G connection in your farm is going to be almost more important. Which I know sounds ridiculous, but if you can't get the multiple data points without a way of carrying that data, And that's what 5G does. And no, it doesn't kill bees. I was just on Scottish radio talking about this the other week. It doesn't. If anything kills bees, actually, it's 3G that kills bees, because 5G is a different hyper frequency. So it doesn't. Well, I know, but one point is, protect the bees. Don't get me wrong. Save the bees. I'm a great believer in it. I'm a huge environmentalist, and I started an eco company 25 years ago. So I'm totally behind all the stuff, doing stuff in hemp. So it's not like I'm a technologist that believes that we should destroy the planet. It's just that if you are going to take advantage of the fourth industrial revolution, you have to have the technology pieces in there. You must probably, I know it sounds ridiculous, but I'd even start looking at, how do you as individual businesses get 5G to where you are? And I know that Scottish farmers in Shetland and other places are already doing this. So, even in England, we're doing it. It's just not doing it everywhere.
Or you could say Starlink, and Isaac, we made the comment about Africa, that you can go through Africa if you stay on the main roads and get 3G all the way through. So they've just gone above landlines. They've never had landlines. So
absolutely. And so again, this is the thing. So you say developing countries or whatever. It's a bit like I don't know if you know about Estonia and how amazing Estonia is for its connectivity and other places. Yeah, but there are places in the world now, and literally, and I go to them because I obviously have the joy of working with lots of different companies, and it's quite embarrassing sometimes, because you go and you presume that they're going not to be as good as we are in technology, and they are 10 years ahead.
Yep.
Now, 10 years ahead in technology is terrifying, because that's like 100 human years. We shouldn't be this behind places like China if we want to be able to compete in a global market. Because you go to Shanghai, it's terrifying how far ahead they are.
So Isaac, just segueing it to you, you've just signed up to do your Nuffield Scholarship. What I'm getting a view from Dan is that we need to be curious. We need to go explore our sector, or the sectors that we're in, because perhaps the answers aren't going to come to us. We've actually got to go find the answer. And deploying the likes of the Nuffield Scholarship, Dan, I'm sure you know of it. It's a brilliant scholarship scheme that runs throughout UK agriculture, or the worshipful company of farming. Isaac, what's your view? Do you think I'm correct? Dan's premise is correct, that we need to be curious, and perhaps we need to find our own answers for our own businesses?
100%. So I think it is ultimately the only way we'll survive. There's a great graph of a little circle here of my comfort zone, and then a big circle there where the magic happens. And so we all like being in our comfort zone, but if we're going to achieve anything as an industry or as a society or whatever, so we need to be where the magic happens. And I think that's exactly what you're describing there, Dan. It's going finding it. It's not going to come to us.
And Dan, obviously the next thing, it's all very well having that tech. The better businesses that we see out there have got fantastic leaders. You mentioned the likes of Tesla, and I'm sure everyone's dialing in to hear the eclectic story of Mr. Musk. And one thing I've learned from having various people from Tesla on our various broadcasts is how he's inspiring within his business, and people want to work for him rather than a Goldman Sachs. Leaders, Dan, talk to us about leaders. So we get the tech bit. We need to go out there and be curious to find the potential answers. How do we become better leaders, or how do we source better leaders to take the businesses further forward?
Well, the key point there, Max, is it's the days of management are over. It's no longer managing. If you're just managing, then I think that's the problem. And I do love the fact that the word managing is always used. We're just managing. Well, think about that as a sentence. We're just managing is not a forward-thinking, progressive company. You're just managing. It's just like saying, well, how are you doing? Oh, we're surviving. No, this is a time for thriving. You can't be just surviving, yeah? So I think leadership is key. As in, there's a couple of things you can really take home. I think you could really, if you haven't read loads of books around it, please do Google stuff, but start thinking about servant leadership, which I know for many people might be a bit cringy. You might be like, well, my job is the boss, and my job is to, I'm leading from the front and I'm the boss and da-da-da. But actually, a friend of mine said this to me about 20 years ago, and I wish I'd listened to him more. And he now runs a very, very successful agency. And he said, actually, his job was to create a positive company culture. That was all his job was just to, not to lead from the front, but to actually lead from the back and actually just listen to his team and create a positive company culture. Because when you create that company culture, then people will be curious. People will go out and find stuff. People will be proactive, but they're only proactive. And again, I don't want to start waxing too lyrical, but there's this thing called psychological safety. And if all these are kind of new concepts to you, like psychological safety and company, and employee engagement things, you've got to start learning about that stuff. You've got to start asking for feedback from your team. You've got to start getting rid of the idea that you're doing it by yourself. It's everybody on the same team collaborating together with the boss or the leader, I would think, not leading from the front. So we kind of need a new word, because leader always implies leading everybody, but actually you're facilitating everyone to greatness. The other thing you've got to think about, and again, I'll try not to rant about it, but diversity is key with this. Diversity of thought is key when it comes to creating decent company cultures. And you might think, well, a farm isn't a company. Well, let's just say organizations. But a great stat, I think I finished with this stat with when I did my TED talk, and I think it was that's it, it was actually it, right? So the difference between a bad company culture and a great company culture, those businesses make 4 or 5 times the amount of money. So the companies that have, which is why things like Tesla now exist, and then they're now they're massive companies, and it's because they had great company cultures and they grew really quickly. They employed the right talent, but talent wanted to work with them. You could definitely argue that's because Elon Musk is amazing and blah 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 and a great PR. And I'm not going to get into the conversation is Elon Musk really a Bond villain, because I think he might be, but that's a different point in time. I mean, come on, he owns the Boring Company. They make tunnels under the ground. He wants to go to the moon. I mean, come on, it's just a Bond. This is why I thought we had James Bond. You better get rid of these people. Anyway, it's like Moonraker on steroids. And even the solar panel thing I don't trust, and the rockets. I mean, come on, one person shouldn't have all these things. Anyway, it's not the point. But to create these amazing companies, he has to have an amazing team around him. He must have several thousand amazing teams, but he knows he can't talk to all of them individually. So you've got to empower people to be autonomous and have mastery and purpose, which is, again, is great Daniel Pink book, it's about drive. And then you've got to leave them to do their work. You've got to leave them to do the work. Now, as I was just talking about before, I promised I won't rant, so I'll try not to, but slight rant. And that is, the diversity of thought piece is really important. It's not just diversity around age and around race and around gender and all these things. It's actually diversity of thought, because diversity of thought drives innovation. Google, you can Google all this stuff, but they think it's something like, if you have a diverse board, you're 21% more profitable because of innovation. Now, if you want to make a bit more money, that's how you do it. You make sure the next people you hire aren't the same as you. Because having people that are the same as you, it's just groupthink. And we know what happens with groupthink. Groupthink creates a problem. In fact, we know from farming, monoculturalism. Monoculturalism is bad. It takes all the stuff out of the soil. You can't grow stuff afterwards. It's a bad thing to do. We know it in nature. We know it around the world. But I'm always amazed in business, we then don't take that on board enough. We don't realize that actually employing friends of friends won't necessarily be good in the long run. And if it's a family business and you all know each other, by the way, be scared of any company that says we're like a family, because that's actually a lack of boundaries and a lack of series of other things, which should be a red flag if you say that we're like a family. But sorry to anyone who's a family business. You can be a family business and be very profitable and be very professional. I just say that you shouldn't always hire cousins, because that's not always the to do. It's just diversity. The diversity, I'm going to say, it's not from a political point of view. It's not even a moral point of view. It's actually, literally, you make more money if you are diverse in your company.
Isaac, views?
So now I've heard something that says culture's moved out of the organization, out of the boardrooms, out of the organograms, is moved into the teams. And I think that's a bit what you've said there, Dan. It's the people that makes it, and there's the companies that recognize that it's the people that drive the companies that are going to thrive in the future.
Can I just give my example? Innocent Drinks. So Innocent Drinks, they were set up by three marketing gurus who wanted to do something different and do some good, and they created that culture. So Dan, I love that bit about the job of a leader is to create that culture. They were getting at one point 4,000 applications a month, unsolicited, for people to work for them. So they managed to pick the best of the best to take the business further forward. Then it successfully was sold to Coke 3 years, which is another story. But then over here, I've got an example of a particular individual who keeps on dropping into companies. He has to have the personalized parking spot. He has to have the board. Physical board level in the building, and only board individuals can enter that portion of the building. And he keeps on failing within those businesses and wonders why he keeps on failing, because no one wants to work for him. And
Exactly.
I am the leader. No, you're not, because no one wants to be led by you. They're all going off to work for instant drinks.
Absolutely. I mean, and that is the key thing. So that's why I always talk, it's all about people. Yeah. At the end of the day, it's all about people, because technically that's what companies and organizations are, just the people. We sometimes forget because we get so excited about all the rest of it. I mean, go back in the day, the reason why companies exist, we were all sitting around fires, for crying out loud. We were tribal for a bit, then we were teams, then there was companies. But the whole point of being is you have to be likable enough for you to be successful, because it's actually your people that make you successful. It's that way around. You don't make the people successful, your people make you successful. Now, I personally think, because I'm a bit of a hippie, this ties into happiness. And if you can make your people more happy and more content and more engaged at work, then you'll become more successful as well. And there are, I could say, I'm very happy to send you all the stats on that being true. I think we've gone past now the times where, my dad would have said, you're not meant to be happy at work. That's why you're at work. That's why they pay you. Actually, to be fair, he never said that. He was a vicar. He never said that. I just made up the fact that he could say it. But anyway, the point being is, but old school gentlemen might say, that's why you get paid, because, we pay you. You're not meant to like work because we pay you. Yeah. But of course, the next generation won't do that. The next generation won't listen to any of that nonsense. They'll go and work for somebody else. Yep.
And also now, one thing that we're definitely seeing, Dan, is that we think there's going to be a downturn of recruitment because of everything that's going on. Training and development. There's a fantastic graph, I've got to find it again, from Cranfield University, showing that those companies that invest in training and development of their teams, and this is from everyone all the way through, those that invest into the team, far better increased turnover and far better profitability and far better staff retention. So our sector, again, is slightly behind, but there's a lot of organizations looking to help upskill, train within the sector. So training and development is really key for us in our sector as well. And I'm guessing, Dan, you'd be a firm believer of that training, of that development with the businesses that you're involved with.
Well, without being silly about it, if you don't train your staff, then they'll leave. One of the biggest reasons why people leave is being a bad boss or being a bad leader. But the second one is lack of career development and career progression, because and this always makes me smile, because I was talking to it's in marketing and marketing agency, but still it's the same principle, and they had a really good point, which was what they say to people is, you come to work for us and we'll make you a star. Yeah, because their whole point is, I want you to go on LinkedIn, I want you to go on social media, I want you to have a personal brand, I want you to become bigger than the company and become famous. Yeah. Now, for some people, they'll be like, oh my God, that sounds awful. Okay, I get it. But the principle is that you're helping them become better. You're helping them make more money. You're helping their brand progress. You're not basically saying, oh, no. All the stuff goes to our own, all the stuff goes to our brand and our company media channels. You're not allowed to talk about it, because actually that's the worst marketing ever. A lot of people don't realize that literally was talking to someone yesterday. If your staff share your social media stuff, that lead converts 7 times higher than if you do it yourself.
Yep.
Yeah, because people buy from people, and people now don't trust advertising. They don't trust all these other things anyway, but they trust people that they know. So actually, your most important marketing channel is actually your employees. If you're a large enough organization, you're lucky enough to do it. Your most important, the most important people are your people. But actually, even now in marketing, if they put it on Twitter, if they share it on Instagram, that's more powerful than if you do. Think about it. But lots of leaders don't think of it like that.
Go, Isaac.
That's exactly the conversation we were having the other night on the Circle of Influencers. It's about that. But how do you balance that with actually doing the work then? Because so if somebody's constantly on Instagram or whatever, so they don't or perceived to not actually getting the job done. So how do you find that balance?
Well, again, this is another thing that blows people's minds, but it really shouldn't. It's just objective based. It's just objective based working. I mean, we do this in tech all the time. If I'm paying a developer to do something, I'll work out the spec before we take them on, and then it's up to them. If they come up with a really clever way of doing it, which only takes them an hour, I'm still going to pay them the same amount of money than if they said it took them a day. So we've got to kind of get rid of this kind of presenteeism and this idea. So obviously, as a good leader or as a good team leader, you'd sit down and you have your quarterly reviews, you have whatever, but you'd also talk to them about, what do you want out of life? How can we both get there? And also, this is what you need to give me in this job. Your job is to do this. That's what I need you to do. Yeah, which is awesome. We're going to make sure that you're on it. And by the way, my job is to help you get there. So my job is to help train you. If you don't feel you've got the training, I'll give you more training. Your job is to get them better. But I think you've got to go objective based, because otherwise you do get into this kind of weird grey area, which is what's happening at the moment, where a lot of people are saying, you've got to come back to the office because I need to see you. I need to be able to see what you're doing, which of course is nonsense, because we've been more productive. A lot of sectors are more productive working from home, which is why you've got this this is why the revolution's happening, because people aren't going back to the offices because they don't have to, because actually it's better for them, life work balance, mental health, the rest of it. But of course, people also want to meet each other. So you're seeing people now that are going back 2 days a week, and people are still missing the point of how revolutionary that is, because you're only in the office 2 days a week. Now, this can't be for everybody, of course. I'm not saying that you can do remote farming. I'm not saying that is the case, But I think you'll be surprised, you're talking about from an individual job point of view, if you make them happy and engaged at work, then people work harder anyway. So productivity is the bit. And if they're more productive, your job is not to give them more work to do. Your job is to make them happy. So when they're more productive, they also do some social media stuff, because basically you'll just do it naturally. Like if you are, if you're telling a story about how fantastic it is to work at a place, you just do that naturally because it's a nice thing to do. That's a great company culture to create. Now, I've got to be careful with words, and I've got to be careful of taking it from marketing and bringing it instantly into agriculture. But there is the potential. I think you'll all know different brands in your sector which are more personable and are more likable. Now, has that been created by a marketing person, or has that been created by just a nice person who's good at marketing? I don't know the answer, but I can definitely pick out things like in different sectors where you can see that the leader is a nice person.
Yeah, I agree. Dad, agree. Just go back to the training development side. Just give us a bit of a steer on it. When you're having that quarterly review, 6-monthly review, or just a walk around the yard, and you want to, do you be prescriptive to that person and say, I think you need this sort of training? Or is it a bit like you mentioned about being a dad, trying to encourage a kid to do a particular sport, and they go, no, I'm not doing that. And you realize, actually, you've got to go with what they want to do. Should you be asking that open question to that team member? What training do you think you would like that's going to better you in life, but also for your work? What would you like? Do you think that's the right way to go? Or
that is exactly. I mean, what you're talking about there, Max, is exactly why we built YourFlock. So YourFlock allows you to do weekly feedbacks and ask those kind of open questions about, but it's tied around values. So the YourFlock system works out the values of the individual, then does a little culture map, and then you can, but also the things you're talking about there is a weekly feedback mechanism that you can then, the team leader then gets the information. So, for example, YourFlock, one of our core values is caring, and so each week it might say, how's the team become more caring this week? Caring is important to you, Dan, or I'm autonomous as well. There's lots of different ones, but it gives me the opportunity to then feed back to my team leader. To Michal, who's my boss as well as my co-partner. That's kind of why we built it, because the idea of doing this every quarter is really dangerous. If you're doing it every quarter, or even worse, you're doing it every year. I mean, good Lord, just imagine we just talked about how quickly things are changing, and it's going to get quicker and quicker and quicker. And you do a quarterly review around someone's job. Quarterly review is scary. A yearly, well, that's suicidal, because what's changed in a year? Well, they might, they've had a child. They didn't. Everything could barely change in a year. For crying out loud, the whole world could have changed. Or they could have left in, So there's a real thing, and I've just got to be careful again. So, because it's different for different sectors, but there's a real danger that we take out the humanity part of stuff, and we forget that actually we're all human beings trying to live through stuff together. Like right now, times are hard. We know in the UK, times are going to be hard and they're a bit tricky, but also you've got to make sure that your staff can become more resilient, but you've also got to help them as well. So if you're only doing quarterly reviews, just imagine that if you were doing a quarterly review with your team at the moment, you've got to do weekly. I think at the moment, you've got to try to ask them. So to answer your question, sorry, from a training point of view, absolutely yes. You would say to them, what kind of training do you think that you would need? Then, of course, you've got the right as the employer as well to say, oh, brilliant, we'll put you on that course. Oh, by the way, I'd really like you to do this one as well, because your job role is this, and therefore it'd be great if you got better at that, because hey, I want you to become the best of that there is. Brilliant. Therefore, let's do that too, because you can do both. And of course, it's the old joke, the CEO and the CFO is, the CFO moans about how much you spend on training, and the CEO knows that if you don't spend that on training, you're not going to have a company. So, the CFO won't have a job. So
that's brilliant. That's brilliant, and it always feels like with this leadership role, but we've got to find another word for it. This management role, we've got to find another word for it. You're looking after your own flock, to use your expression. You're just gauging, seeing where they are. You've got, I'm going to use my jingoistic term. You've got that golden thread of the training development. They're all on, but you're just checking in with them all the time to see how they're getting on. But without being too on top of them, but also knowing that there's an open door for. So again, it comes back to those better businesses that will attract more people, and as such, those people that you bring in will be able to manage the people that they're bringing in, and then it's this lovely virtuous circle.
Yeah, no, that's the spiral up. I think just knowing about feedback, I think Isaac had a question. His hand went up, but I don't know if that was because he was pushing a button or whether he had a question.
I was right to answer this one first, Dan, and I'll come back on that.
It's exactly that. It's the virtuous cycle of feedback mechanisms that you've got to try to create. I mean, that's the reality of it. And that, by the way, that is a full-time job. So I'm going to go back to what Isaac was saying before about that is the job, because that is a full-time job. If you think you can do all this plus another role, now don't get me wrong, I work for a startup and I have several hats that I have to wear, and yeah, that's just part and parcel of it. But if you're an established business, let's say, and I'm presuming most people on the call are quite an established business, and you're not taking this role seriously enough about protecting and helping your people, either employ somebody else to do it because it's a real thing, or to change and take it on yourself. And by the way, please use technology to help you. You know, I'm not saying you've got to become this amazing, but that's one reason why we built YourFlock, for goodness sake. You know, it makes it easier to do it for you. So it saves you hours of time because that's technology. But that's the whole point of technology. So it's not just about YourFlock. There are things like, you know, if you haven't got a project management tool, you've got to have a project management tool. You've got to have a whole suite of this technology that you'll need. Just like in marketing, it used to be that, you know, you could potentially, maybe 20 years ago, you could have one guy doing the marketing, one lady doing the marketing. Now, because of digital and data and everything else, it's got so big, everybody has to have a toolkit of different things. I use about 16 different tools in my marketing, but that's because you have to. You can't do it all yourself, yeah? Now, you bring in like every farm might have a data scientist in a 5 years time, you know, like, because it's a role, it's a thing, you know, this is the reality. Now, if you don't and you let AI do it, that's a danger as well, because you might not know anything about AI, and therefore, how would you know the machine's telling you the truth? Yeah. Now, that's a risk. That's a business risk. Yeah, that's a business risk you're going to do. That's a weakness of the project. So you might have a halfway home, which is what we do in marketing at the moment. You have everything that collects the data, but you also have a data scientist. That's what we do at YourFlock. I mean, YourFlock technically now has a machine learning system behind it, which is doing cool stuff. But we had to put in 100 grand to build that system. So, but we decided that the best way to do that is to build the system with a data scientist, create the system, and then you don't need a data scientist later on. But, you know, I did promise I wouldn't rant about the future too much. And I think I just did. So I'm going to stop that bit because I don't want to scare everyone. But, you know.
That was a question I had. That was a question I had earlier, Dan. So, you know, currently farmers have got all this knowledge. You were talking about the knowledge and it's being, in some places, superseded by data. But so how do you find that balance? How do good companies use the data but still use the kind of old knowledge, if you like?
Yeah, that is... Yeah, okay, that's a really, really, really great question. It literally is the $24 trillion question. You know, when do we hand over all this stuff to the machines is a really good point. Now, I can tell you right now, that AI systems are not as clever as people think. I can absolutely guarantee you that's the case. Don't believe the hype, you know, the hype cycle, you know, we've got to be careful. We've got to keep humans in the system right now, I think, for at least another 5 years. Yeah. If your business is 5 years behind the times with everybody else, well, maybe it might be a bit longer. But at some point, you need to be able to say, okay, there's so much data now that it's impossible for me to do by myself. Yeah, which is okay, by the way, because it's like same with me with marketing. Like I did the other day, a couple of scary things happened to me the other week. One of them is I saw how great I don't know if you guys have ever seen DALL-E. The DALL-E 2 is GPT-3, the model. Basically, there's an AI model, and I can send you some links for it so then everyone can kind of do some behind the scenes kind of learning. Okay, so AI was meant to never be able to do art, because art is a human function. So, you know, computers could not understand the process of subjectively creating an art piece. This is the idea, by the way, because computers are just like calculators. Yeah. However, AI systems now can create, not only can they, you know, guess cardiac arrest quicker than a doctor can, and it's now an Apple Watch, for crying out loud. It has a potential to guess when you're going to be in trouble and then do a telephone call. That just happened in the new Apple Watch. I mean, insane. It's gone through the FDA approval. It's a thing. It's a real thing. It's on your wrist. It costs like 300 quid. Anyway, so but that's not AI. That's machine learning. So the AI systems can start creating artwork. Now, when I did my TEDx talk about 6 months ago or so, that artwork wasn't great. It was okay, but it's quite pretty. You can use a thing called Dream and have a look at some stuff. But now if you look at DALL-E 2, the artwork is insane. And all you do is you type out what you want the computer to create, and it creates it. Yeah. So it's one sentence, and it creates this thing for you. Right? So now loads of graphic designers are panicking because you can type in pretty much anything into DALL-E 2, and it'll make it. Now, gets even worse, gets even more funky. If you do this with words, not in DALL-E 2, but in the thing called GPT-3, you do this with words, and you can create blogs and content, and you can create that content within like 7 minutes, and the machine does it for you. So you literally, to the extent of, Max, you'll just put in a keyword like, I don't know, vertical farming, then it'll find you those keywords associated with it, and then you put those bits in there, and you click literally 3 or 4 buttons, and it will create a 500 word piece that it stitches together from everything on the internet and just does it in front of you. Yeah. So loads of marketeers at the moment are using copy AI and content AI and then charging people for the content, because that's what they used to write, because we used to write content, but the machine now writes it for us.
Good grief.
Yeah. So we're already at the point. Now, that's not even talking about programmatic buying and other things you can create. But if you can imagine, you have a DALL-E system which creates the graphic design stuff. You have content AI that creates the words. You have something else that does like Strikingly does the website. That's a self-contained system. By the way, this is an analogy for farming.
Yeah,
this is purpose.
That's what I was going to ask, Dan, is bring it back to farming. So what about these things do you see in agriculture in the next 5 years, 10 years, and what's that excites you about it that we can bring back to agriculture?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I mean, pretty much everything excites me about agriculture in the next 10 years, because I think it's just going to be absolutely insane what's going to happen. As I said before, I think biggest danger is the fact you have technology companies that come in and own all of it without you realizing what's happening. It happens a bit too late. So look at stuff like, and I know people might roll their eyes and things, but you're looking at stuff like vertical farming. You look at the ability to start growing food in different places. You look at, AI systems and the data banks and the 5G stuff. And then I just talked about there, that was the metaphor, the complete system inside itself. And of course, I'm sure everyone on the call knows. So, the whole is it called aquaponics systems, where you can then use
aquaponics and hydroponics.
Yeah, hydroponics, right. So, but you can also then use the fish to do the fertilizer, which grows the fish, which does the thing, which made the food, but it's all inside its own system, inside a greenhouse, powered by solar power. Now, you could go, but that's kind of stuff that's going to happen on Mars. Yeah, but that's exactly why there's so much money in going into it, because that might be stuff that happens on, on the moon. Cool. Yeah. But just imagine if you're using 95% less fertilizer and water and everything else inside its own system that creates a product that you then stand back from, and the AI system works out, that's a license to print money. And it's literally your competitive advantage. It's the same as having the printing press and realizing you can print dollars off it. And the question will be, and this is why I think it's fascinating, is food scarcity and this I think it's called food security in your industry. Yeah, this whole food security piece, this should be done by governments, but it should be done massively by governments. Like, they should be just spending fortunes now, because what we don't want to happen is, I'm not going to talk about the wars and other things, but we need to be able to eat food. Yeah, just like we need power and electricity. Yeah. So, there's basic Maslow's hierarchy of needs we need in the world, and one of them is going to be food. The other one's energy. Energy can come from solar power. Yes, that might be cool, and some other things that we need to do a lot more than fracking, etc. But if you look at the self-contained systems, that principle might be something that you can do en masse, on scale, not as a complete self-contained system, but certainly taking the principles of that, because that brings down your cost, which increases your profits, which is exciting. I think.
Jens, we're just slightly running out of time, but your philosophy, Dan, is spot on. Isaac, what about that great example of the likes of JCB? JCB, I think it was 3-4 generations ago, Dan, they were but farmers, and Mr. Bamford started making trailers, and now you look at them today, and they're one of the UK's largest agricultural and construction companies of machinery on a global basis. So what do I say with that? That perhaps people dialing in today, perhaps they've got this answer. If they can adopt what you're stating in the way of seeing the technology, adopting it to solve the problem that they see, the perceived problem, and using the leadership skills that you've intimated, they've got the potential to grow a great business. Isaac, do you think?
Definitely. I think the answers are amongst the people listening in and amongst everybody. So that it's those people with those ideas and pursuing them, I guess, and it's what gives people the confidence to pursue them.
Well done. And Dan, just before we wrap up, I just want to hear it from you again. From your perspective, with all of your insight and wider industry and wider technology, you are excited about farming, about agriculture? You see a bright future?
I'd see a bright future, but I'd also see a future which is going to change so quickly for lots and lots of people that everyone has to get on board right now. It's not something that's going to happen like next year, the year after. It's already happening, by the way. So if you're on the call and you're thinking, oh, I'm not 100% sure, for goodness sake, spend this afternoon finding out what's going on in the world, because it's already happening. Yeah. But I honestly believe that with the right mindset, well, I said 5 years ago, and I hate to quote myself at the end, but I'm so egotistical, I will. But with the right people and the right technology, you take over the world. But with the wrong people and the wrong technology, that world takes over you. And I said that 5 years ago, and I'm pretty still happy with that as a quote. It's going to stand the test of time. So I think what you've got to really do is maybe just take a bit of a step back, always have a bit of a breather, be careful of the hype curve, because we could all get too excited. But this bit now, we're past the hype curve. It's now the plateau of productivity. If you are still thinking, oh, should I be using drones? Should I look into robots? Goodness sake, please do that now before Amazon decide to buy land, because that's what will happen. So protect yourselves by investing in technology now, but not even necessarily investing in it, investing in the time for you to find out about it and for you to get excited about it. Because if you as a leader aren't excited about the technology change, nobody else in your team will be. Yeah. And so then you're going to have people who are like, oh no, I'm the same as the boss. We don't believe in social media. We don't believe in technology. We don't believe in electricity. Well, good luck with that, because if you don't believe in electricity or petrol, we know how farming changed when those things came about. So let's not kid ourselves. Farming's used to revolutions. I mean, goodness, you own one of them. It was called the agricultural revolution. You own one of them already, and you had the green revolution. Now it's most probably the technology revolution. Yeah,
Dan, well done. Isaac, I think we've learned so much from Dan today, and especially if you think of the people either in physical farming or the ancillary sectors, they know it, they understand it, and so to adopt everything that Dan has stated, to look to create success either within existing businesses or to be brave and look to create something themselves or and with a group of people. Isaac, the future would look to be bright.
It's brilliant. Really, really enjoyed today. Thank you very much, Dan. If you want to see more of Dan, we are having Dan back for the Agri-Leader Forum on the 7th and 8th of February. So we'll see you there. And also, we are on the 10th of November. So we've got the Delivering the Future meeting. So a meeting for levy payers and industry to see the direction of travel for AHDB. So make sure you sign up for that and join us on the 10th of November to find out the direction of travel for AHDB. Thank you very much, Dan.
And just to wrap up, I think it's just worthwhile mentioning that Dan, you won't be perhaps aware of this. The Farmers Weekly, they ran a competition in the year 2000 as to the best piece of farming equipment that had been invented in the first 100 years leading up to the year 2000. And drum roll, I thought it was going to be the combine. It was actually the mobile phone. And so that was the year 2000. Look where we are now, 22 years. There you go. So everything that you've said is all about technology and leadership, and that's why we need to adopt your thinking and to make a success out of this marvelous sector that we're all in. Dan, you've been fantastic. Isaac, you've been brilliant as always. We'll see you at the next one. And Dan, we look forward to seeing you in February in person.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Very excited to do it. And I'll see you all there. And thanks, Max. And thanks, Isaac, as well, of course. Lovely to be here. Thanks, everyone.
Okay. And Dan, before we go, who's the world's best football team?
Manchester City, apparently. But we lost to Liverpool, so I'm not going to mention that.
Okay, boom. Well done.